Hi everyone, my name is Frank Devigne. I'm one of the True Global Ventures partners. I'm glad to moderate this second TGV podcast where we are going to talk about building a new asset class backed by Gemstones with Stefan Tittel, the co-founder and CEO of quantumrock. Let me give a little bit of context. Traditionally, ETFs have been linked to assets like gold, stocks, and bonds. Now there is a surging interest in ETF based on alternative real-world assets. Among these, Gemstones presents a compelling proposition, apparently. So to keep the TGV spirit in this podcast, we will take questions from the chat. So for the audience, do not hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. I'll pick up some at the end of the sessions. And to keep the dynamic, I try to ask short questions and expecting sharp answers from the speakers. Let's start with quantumrock and you, Stefan Tittel. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Nice to be here, Frank. Thank you very much. Stefan is my name. I'm the CEO and founder of quantumrock. It's like a tech company building unique investment products. And I'm doing this actually for all my life. I'm a serial entrepreneur in the fintech space and have created a couple of successful companies before. But since around 8 years, all of my attention goes into quantumrock.
Excellent. So from AI fintech to gemstone kind of ETF, what brought you to this gemstone market opportunity?
Yeah, it seems not obvious, but when you look at it, it is because we are trying to make a niche investable for professional investors. And when you look, for instance, at gemstones, it all started with price discovery and price transparency based on AI and machine learning. And that's we got into the space and discovered a very compelling and very valuable new asset class for professional investors.
Okay, so what the size of this market and the growth factor that you identify?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's a huge market. So we are talking about gemstone-based jewelry of around 37 billion a year right now. So it's massive. But what is more important, it's a very old market. So we are talking about centuries and thousands of years in which gemstones have been an asset class of some sort. So for many, it was a store of value all along. And it also was used, as an escape currency when you needed to leave where you live because of war or crisis. So it's a very old asset class, so to speak, but not open and investable for professional and institutional investors up to now because the lack of compliance, the lack of transparency, and so on. And that's what we set out to change.
So by the way, what are gemstones? What are the ones you're focusing on and why? You elaborate on that?
It's a very good question. We should have started with this. I can tell you first what gemstones are not. They are not diamonds, so they are totally different things. I always say the easiest way to remember is diamonds are like vodka, very pure, but more or less all the same. While gemstones are like whiskey, a good wine, a complex cognac or something like this. So gemstones are much more scarce. To give an idea, on an annual basis, 3,000 tons of gold are mined, 60 tons of diamonds, and just 600 kilograms of gemstones. Gemstones are emeralds, rubies, aquamarines, those type of colored stones, which by definition are extremely rare, extremely natural, because they have these colors embedded in them, which makes them unique.
So there is some scarcity there, which could create value. What are the main producers? Where are the countries where we find this kind of gemstones?
I mean, they are mined and produced all over the world. Major sources are, of course, in Africa, India, Asia, but also in Brazil and other Latin American companies. However, when we look at making it investable for institutional investors and also professionals, it's always a question of origination. So where do they come from? Are these sources compliant and so on? And that's why, for instance, we focus on gemstones from Brazil only, because Brazil is considered to be, like a white country with regards to gemstone sources, which means this country is also part of the International Action Task Force against terrorism financing and so on. And as well, the mines there, the gemstone mines, are state monitored and state controlled. So they have anti-money laundering and certain ESG policies in place, which helps us when we talk about a properly sourced and documented products.
Okay, very clear. Given the success of diamonds as an asset class, can gemstone replicate that and form an asset class of its own?
So first of all, I'm not so happy with the asset class of diamonds, not at all. What you need to consider is, in contrary to gemstones, which are really scarce, diamonds have never been scarce and are not scarce. So there has always been an oversupply, which was restricted artificially restricted to keep the prices up. And that's why, talking about diamonds, you see up and downs in the prices all the time. So it's actually a marketing-driven, let's call it a commodity, a marketing-driven commodity with major demand coming from the US. So this is one side of the story, but still it's for aesthetic and investment purposes not bad. When you talk about gemstones, it's different. It's scarce as it gets. Yeah, we are talking about, for certain stones like we consider now, for instance, Paraiba tourmaline. There's just one mine in the world, and this mine is almost exhausted. And this mine is just producing kilograms a year. So it's very low quantities, meeting an universal demand. And the major demand driver are from Asia and India. So the growing democracies are behind the general global demand. However, also the large jewelry pieces are also based on gemstones. So it's a little bit different. As an asset class, which is your question, I think it's a very big thing, because investors we are talking to, professional institutional investors, what are they looking for? They're looking for an investment which is not correlating with other asset classes like stocks, treasuries, and so on. They are looking for something which is inflation resistant, yeah. And they're also looking for something which has a high chance of resistance to crisis and wars. And if I could complete the wish list, yeah, the best would be something fully asset-backed. And when you take the sum under all of this, I mean, the answer is gemstones. It's all of that. And that's why I believe it has a place in the market. It needs to be brought into the light, yeah, to make, but then it's a unique opportunity with also a very compelling return expectation.
Yeah, so regarding returns, what are the performance of the past in regards to gemstone versus the other asset classes?
Yeah, so when you look at, I mean, there are many different kinds of gemstones. Let's talk about 16, which are the most common ones, and about those 16, maybe 5 or 6, which are traded in relatively high volume. And when you look at those stones, when they are finished product, I mean, cut and polished, like you can use it in some necklace or ring and so on. The annual appreciation in value is depending on the stone and quality between 5 and 8%, maybe 5 and 9% over the years, year on year, for the past, I don't know, 30 years, since we have the relevant data, but also before it's a relatively steady curve of increasing values with low volatility. So this in itself, it's a good investment when you're looking for something inflation resistant, low volatility, asset backed. Yeah. However, there's another opportunity we currently focus on, which is turning rough gemstones, so pre-cut rough gemstones as they come out of the earth, so to speak, from the mine, turning them into cut and polished stones by a rather simple process. Yeah, this cutting and polishing, it's not a complex process, but anyway, in that process, the stones usually appreciate 3x, 5x on the original value. And this is the most interesting part of the market, we feel. And this is also what we are tapping into with our investment products.
Okay, so that's the one with the highest expected ROI from what I understand from you. And so can you elaborate on the new Rough Gemstone fund that you are launching, and why rough gemstone? You just explained the process of from rough to cut and polish versus gemstone. So why you have put on phases for the first fund on that particular process?
Yeah. So when you look again at gemstones, we briefly touched, it's very compelling theoretically. Ancient asset class, scarce, very aesthetic, and so on, and proven over centuries. However, when you want to make it investable for you and me and other professional investors, it's not that easy. Yeah, because you need to have a proper structure. You deal with a commodity with limited transparency on the prices. You need to have compliance on the sources and so on. And that was our task. That was our task for way over a year of investment and diligence. So we created a Luxembourg structure, which is comparable to an ETC, ETF type structure for gold, or what you usually know. So created the structure with top lawyers and top auditors, and made it in a secured way. So whenever you invest, it's secured by the assets underneath via a pledge. Secondly, and for the first time, such a product is also stock listed. So you have a price transparency and so on. But most of all, we took care of the sourcing. So we identified and analyzed proper sources for gemstones. We had several auditors examining the stones, taking care they are really there, they are authentic, they are properly stored, no conflict of interest and so on, and that the stones we have, they have a proper paper trail. So no money laundering, no nothing involved, no child work, whatever you name it. Yeah. So also certain ESG criteria. And then we created through several experts, certified gemstones expert, we established a value for this stock. And with that, we have the basis to get this up and running. And we did so already. So we acquired in total with investors' money around $125 million in specific stones. And we are now already in the process of cut and polishing, which basically means first they need to be sorted. We are almost done with that. And then they go in buckets of 5 to 15 kilograms all over the world, mainly to Thailand and India, get cut and polished, monitored, recertified, and then eventually stored in Switzerland and Luxembourg and sold off. So the process is more logistics. Yeah, the cut and polishing it's not even a paved way. It's an autobahn, I would say. Yeah, alone in India, you have more than 1 million shops doing this on a regular basis. So it's again, it's a big industry. So and there are many experts out there you can employ and deal with and work with, and that's what we are doing.
Okay, so those certificates are a kind of the product that investors are at some point buying. So once investor will buy these certificates, so maybe you can explain it through, and then what will happen to the Ralph Gemstone itself? Who is the owner of the gemstone, and when they will take the benefit of having about those certificates?
Yeah, so it's fairly simple. You acquire these certificates. It's like shares. The certificates have a term of 24 months, and after 24 months, they will be redeemed by the securitization company. And in the meantime, as the money invested will be used to first acquire a relevant stock of gemstones and then organize the cutting and polishing and selling it off to the respective market. We acquired already the gemstones, the rough gemstones, and we are now in the process of cutting and polishing. So it's straightforward. It's more a buy and hold concept for investors, but just for a 24 months term. The expected return, the expected net return for investors is between 50 and 100%, depending on the market price we will receive at the end of the chain. Investors, however, have also the chance through the stock listing, have also the chance to buy and sell them, so to speak, inside the term to other investors.
Okay, that's a good transition. So to my next question, what is the liquidity like for exchange traded commodities in gemstones specifically?
So currently at this phase, the liquidity at the stock exchange is very limited. We are just getting the last investors in. So the total size, I should have said it's 175 million. We are now at 85%. By the way, we are just in the process of launching already the second product, which will be double in size, because the investors' interest is so high that we see we cannot fulfill the demand with just one product. But anyway, in the beginning, the liquidity through the stock exchange is low. This will change, however, after around 6 months, because then we have excess liquidity in the vehicle and will actively also, in the interest of the other certificate holders, will actively buy back. And we assume also a general higher liquidity by then. But again, the actual idea of this thing is buy and hold. Let's call it like in private equity type investment product, but rather short term, just 24 months. So you invest, participate in the value appreciation and get redeemed after 2 years.
Okay, clear. Look, there is a hype in the ETF business, I would say. What are the similarity that you see between gold ETF, Ralph Gemstone fund, which is kind of ETC ETF, and Bitcoin ETF?
So yeah, so I would say what we almost forget, but some people cannot forget it because they didn't know it. Gold as an ETF, the ETFs made it a real institutional asset class in the beginning, but it's fairly young. It just started around 2001 or 2003, silver even later. So it's a fairly new feature for the market, and it, propels this asset class into the sky, so to speak. Yeah. I see this similarity here. Rare earths came much, much later. Palladium came much, much later, and so on. And you just need to see gemstones in line of those commodities, which are precious and are basically ideal for investors. And gemstones will become also a multi-billion market as an asset class based on ETFs. That's for sure. Right now, we are the first and the only one, but this will also change over time because it's just very compelling. So it's sort of similar. However, the trades, the tweets of gemstones are a little bit more compelling because it's so scarce compared to gold. And I told you the numbers before. Yeah. So it falls in the same category, so to speak. Bitcoin, I mean, it's a totally different animal. You know, I'm talking now about hard asset. It is as hard as it gets, very scarce, non-dilutable. It's determinable what type of value you have for centuries. You know, it's so to speak very old-fashioned, but in a good sense and wrapped into a state-of-the-art, fully regulated investment product. Bitcoin is some of that, but also something else. So that's why I think it's not really comparable.
Okay, excellent. So do you think this new financial instrument related to gemstone could be interesting to professional industry players, like namely producer of gemstones or namely diamond producers, to hedge actually the price on gemstones?
I mean, it's funny that you ask this because it couldn't be more true. I'm not talking about diamonds, so this is not our cup of tea. It's a totally different industry. But very well, we have investors in this product, turning rough into cut and polish stones. We have investors in this product because they want to have a first right of refusal on the end product. So they want to get their foot into the door of cut and polish stone from a proper source. Right now, luxury brands and the big sourcing organizations of those, they're paying almost any price for high quality, properly cut gemstones. So it's very scarce, as I told you before. So that's why professional players start to engage with us via an investment because they want to get their fingers on products, so to speak. So yes, you're right. It's like this.
Okay, look, let's take some questions from the chat. This is a benefit of the one that have been invited to this live session recording. They can ask questions, so I will voice those questions. We start with Pauline, who is asking, given the rarity of gemstones, as you have just described, is the supply large enough to make a substantial, fully asset-backed investment category?
Yes, the question is how large this investment category will be. It will never be as large, you know, that the super big banks will go after it because it will be too small. But what we see for sure is a very compelling asset class of 5 to 10 billion in total. Yeah, for sure, in the medium term, so within the next 3 to 4 years. And we are working on it. Look at it, it's the first product. It's almost fully invested now, 175 million. The next one comes out mid of January. It's 315. And we are working already on the third. It will be close to 700 million. So just us as a first mover here, we see enough demand and also enough volume to get well above 1 billion for sure.
Okay, excellent. Question from Sergey. I wonder whether market price of gemstones are correlated with diamonds ones that are controlled by few players.
No, it's totally different, and I don't want to get too long an explanation, but you know, diamonds are, again, you have oversupply. Technically, you have oversupply. Secondly, you have those trend of lab-grown diamonds and young Americans not adhering to, you know, the old marketing slogans from the 40s. So they are buying lab-grown diamonds. That's why you have price pressure there. On the gemstone side, I mean, we just did the numbers. Only in the past 4 months, some gemstones like aquamarine appreciated like 10 to 15% just in 4 months. Yeah. So you have a totally decoupled and different market and also different price dynamics. you have general events like a big crisis, inflation, and so on, which have an effect on all asset classes more or less the same way. But the simple rule of thumb is the higher you can condense value, yeah, in an asset, so the scarcer it is, the less it will be prone to effects from crisis and wars. And I just always want to tell you, just imagine, you know, take just a handful of very good gemstones, just a handful, and it resembles all the wealth you have and all the wealth you need to live comfortably for the rest of your life. And you just take this handful, put it in your pocket, and you can go anywhere since centuries. And you have a sort of currency which you will buy everything you need, whether it be in the Middle East, in Latin America, in the US, in Asia, China, or in Europe. You know, it's very compelling and distinctive.
Okay, other questions from the chat. Do not hesitate for the other ones. We still have a couple of minutes to answer to those questions. Question from Nassim Kaiser. Is there a secondary market already or still requires market making?
Yeah, so when we talk about our product, yeah, we will create this secondary market. Part of this is also for the cut and polish stone. We created already Bloomberg indices per stone and category. They will be published soon, which is in further, you know, to create transparency and allow trading around this. And we, in our vehicle, will also create secondary liquidity, because our interest also for the other shareholders, certificate holders, is to buy back shares as much as we can. But you know, it's the same like with gold in the beginning. This liquidity and secondary market will appear or emerge with time, and then market makers will jump on it. We are talking to market makers already, and will make sure that some professional players also in the beginning start to provide at least some liquidity. But of course, also one of our tasks.
Okay, excellent. Question from Olivier. Can AI be leveraged? And if yes, how and where?
Yeah, so we have two aspects here. And since we are an AI tech company, first of all, you know, the price prediction and price discovery. So right now for the gemstones, you have very accurate bi-weekly pricing, which is basically comprised from all the market transactions. So it's fairly good actually. But what are you doing in between those 2 weeks? You know, we need daily prices, and that's what we did with our engine. We emulated daily prices, looking for other sources, other prices, but also with statistic methods. So this is one part. And the second part is in our follow-up product, which I now talked about, where we will invest in cut and polish stones, so the finished product. Our AI component will also create the optimized basket, you know, like an optimized portfolio of between the several types of gemstones as well. So those are the two fields I see here.
Okay, one last question, because then questions pop up on the chat. Maybe after the session, you will answer to some of them, Stefan, and I see some kind of due diligence questions. So a last question from Stefan. You mentioned 37 billion as a market size. What is this figure? Annual trading revenue or total asset value of relevant gemstone, or something else that at stage of the value chain?
So this figure is the gemstone-based jewelry. So the annual market volume for a gemstone-based jewelry globally. So it's coming from research and studies published, I don't know, every half a year, but it has nothing to do with trading volume. So this is the demand side, so to speak, for gemstones as such.
Okay, excellent. Look, we will stop here because then we have the third podcast to register. Thank you very much, Stefan, for your key contribution. I ask you to continue to answer some of the questions, if possible. This was a very insightful session. Thank you so much